Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of the Strength for Your Purpose podcast. We are rolling along here. As you're listening to this, it's September. Don't say it too loud, but it's September. I hope you all have had a great week. I know I have. Hope you all have had a great summer. It's not over yet. The official change of season hasn't happened yet. And don't get bummed out just because it's September. Okay. I know I kid around at the start of the podcast there, but this is a beautiful time of year. We're coming into a great time of year. And I wanted to kick that time of year off by talking with the third member, newest member, I guess I should say, of the EA Fitness and Performance team. We've had Evan Amell on here multiple times. Eliza Simmons has also been on at least once, maybe twice. I can't remember now. I probably should know that, but that's okay. And I am pleased to be joined by the third and newest member of the team, Derek Brown, this week. And Derek is a retired police officer from New Hampshire, so a transplant to Maine. We'll let that slide, Derek, because you're a good guy. I've met you, but we've talked a few times. You're a good guy, and he has a very diverse background in as far as his introduction to coaching and personal training, which is a lot of what we want to get to today. And it was kind of born with helping his fellow police officers and firefighters during his career. So without further ado here, Derek, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me here today.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate this. Yeah, like you said, my path into fitness started through police work. So I became a police officer in the early 2000s and became interested in fitness. In New Hampshire, that's part of the requirements of the job. Was some ongoing fitness testing was instituted for each officer, and they have to pass by the Cooper standards. So it's, you know, there's objective figures that they need to reach for push-ups, sit-ups, and a 1.5-mile run. And it's just a way to test the officers to maintain, so that that they're maintaining fitness for duty. I think that the standards through Cooper are not extremely high standards, and I think that the job is pretty taxing physically. You go from 0 miles per hour to 100 at the drop of a hat, and after long periods of boredom, you can then be dropped into whatever proverbial fire is going on at that time.
Yeah.
So for me, it was important to kind of chase that GPP, general physical preparedness, the concept that you could be dropped into any situation at any moment and you would be able to perform the task that you needed to. So I think, like a lot of people, and potentially a little bit earlier than some, I found CrossFit relatively early on. It was different than anything that I had done. I think that, you in my 40s now, and I think as a teenager, there weren't many sources there for fitness related items. I certainly wasn't born in a family where I was going to be able to have a personal trainer who I was able to work with. And you play high school sports, and sports as you're growing up. And then you went to kind of the old standbys, which were Muscle and Fitness magazine and Flex magazine, and you kind of cherry pick some workouts there, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you kind of get into that bodybuilding workout style, but it really wasn't doing everything that I wanted. I found CrossFit. I was fortunate to fall into CrossFit New Hampshire when it was starting up, and then eventually that led to me getting my certification as a CrossFit Level 1. Essentially gives you the power to do some training. They've certainly enhanced that training now with different levels and coaching, but that was kind of the breakthrough. And really, it was for selfish reasons. I didn't intend to coach anyone else. I just wanted to get better myself, and that was the path. So that led me to buying my own equipment, outfitting my own home gym in my basement, and so squat rack, pull up bar, gymnastics rings, kettlebells, and then it led to officers coming to my house to work out. But we're talking about, a typical home basement and me having only a few barbells and trying to run guys through training there, it was getting tight. So I convinced my chief to let me move all my equipment to the police department, take over the workout room there. And then that quickly grew into multiple towns, and our fire department coming and training. So I was fortunate that I was on a shift then. I worked 6 a.m. to 4 p.m.
Mm.
So I ran a CrossFit class on my own time from 4 a.m. to 5 a.m., 5 a.m. to 6 a.m., and then 5 p.m. to 6 p.m., and then 6 p.m. to 7 p.m.
Wow.
most days. So I was running, 4 classes a day, but I had a good group of people who were in it, and it was good. It builds a community, and I think that in different circles, I think CrossFit gets a bad rap sometimes. I mean, it's certainly led to a lot of injuries, but I think a lot of that, like anything, comes down to the coaching
100%. Yeah.
and knowing what you're programming for, and not just making every workout a beat down workout that you're asking people to move weights that they shouldn't be moving at high intensity, and really varying that programming. So that was where I really started getting fascinated with programming. And CrossFit's a little bit different than the programming that I do now, but there is methodology to it.
Mm.
And I think that I just then kind of immersed myself in the world of both fitness and wellness, really. So, I spent a lot of time reading in regards to programming and different types of programming, and then also delving into nutrition. And so that really ignited a fire that, still sticks with me today, which is great. So, that, and seeing the changes that people were making, and positive changes, and people were able to do things that they hadn't been able to do or never thought that they could do, was really something that called to me. So I guess I never really thought that I would go into fitness as a career. It was always a hobby.
Mm.
And so then after retirement, I got to live a pretty fantastic life where I bought an RV and traveled the country for a year,
Wow.
seeing the sights. And, but, it sounds great and saw some amazing places. You kind of lose your sense of purpose at that point.
Mm.
So, now I need to figure out what I want to do when I grow up, basically.
when you grow up the second time, right?
Yeah, the second time, right. So, there's life events that really kind of shape people's paths. And I would say for me, one thing that really struck me is, my mom passed in 2018 from frontal temporal dementia.
Mm.
And she was young. She was 73 years old. And so if I looked at kind of the timeline of her life, at least during the time that, I was around, she had neck surgery relatively young. She had me when she was 36, and she had that surgery when I was about 4 or 5, so somewhere around 40 or 41. And to be honest, I don't know what the neck surgery was. I just know that she had a surgery, and then was essentially told by doctors at that point that she needed to avoid physical activity, specifically lifting items over 10 pounds over her head. And, she was never out of shape. She was never overweight, but she was relatively sedentary. She read a lot, and then she ate the standard American diet. There was nothing real exciting in her life as far as food went. And, she certainly cooked and provided for us, but it was always that typical, you're going to have some meat, you're going to have starch, and you're going to have some vegetables of some sort. But she certainly never looked at nutrition as something that would help her later on in life. So fast forward a little bit, there becomes a period where she started to have some elevated glucose levels. And now I'm old enough and I'm into my police career, and I start talking to her a little bit about some dietary changes. And so she, in rare for family, actually did listen to some advice, and then we were able to get her blood sugar numbers to the point that she was no longer in that pre-diabetic phase. which was a win. But I think it was a day late and a dollar short, because I think that, at that point she was already starting to have kind of some regression, with some neurological things. And then from the time that it started, where we could see a change, it was less than 2 years before she passed. She had she had some wishes that she never have to go into a home and that she'd be able to pass at her house. And I certainly credit my sister with probably taking the brunt of that, but we did, kind of trade on and off. We did at home hospice, and it's certainly something that I would do. You do it again in a heartbeat for a family member,
Sure.
but you never want to see anybody else have to go through that.
Mm.
So I think that that's a big motivator for me, because I think when, at least the research is pretty clear that physical activity can help to at least mitigate or, kind of slow that progression of these neurological disorders down. And I think from a dietary standpoint, I think there are some changes that can be made. And so I think that, at least for me, the training that I do now, um, is to at least help to educate people on some of those things. And maybe taking on those new physical challenges and learning new physical skills may help if there's something genetically where you may be predisposed to something like that. I mean, certainly I think for myself that I certainly must have I must be predisposed to that after her getting it.
Sure. Yeah.
So, you fast forward and I spend a year on the road in an RV, and then trying to figure out what I'm going to do. And I actually timber framed for a year. I really liked it.
Yeah.
I really like doing hand joinery, working with a chisel and a slick, and put some houses up around the coast of Maine and northern Maine, up by um, Moosehead Lake and up off the Golden Road, and it was nice. And then I found that my coworkers who had been timber framing longer than I had some, kind of physical ailments, and I was able to assist them with some exercises and maybe some stretches and things that were able to help with that. And then it kind of hit me that, this has been a passion for a long time, so why not chase that?
Yeah.
So that led me to getting my personal trainer certification, which then, just kind of created that cascade of other certifications that I felt were important.
Mm.
So it's kind of how I got where I am today. I'm fortunate in that, being retired, I can be real selective about where I'm going to work.
Yeah.
And EA had an opening. And for me, I think that the vetting process for me of them was as much, as important as them of me.
Yeah. Yeah. I think
And
that's important. Yeah.
yeah, and I think that you've certainly worked enough at EA, that the community is fantastic there.
Mm.
And Evan and Eliza are both amazing trainers. So it was nice to be able to join that team, because I'm not sure that I would fit in everywhere. I think that maybe I take a little bit of a different approach than other people, but I'm kind of given that freedom to program and work with clients in the manner that I want to, not, by somebody else's standards.
Yeah. Well, and that just makes so much sense, because in that incredible story, and I don't say incredible lightly. I mean, you shared a
Mhm.
lot there about where you started and where you're at now. One of your passions, and I say passion because I don't think anyone works in law enforcement for a full 20, whatever year. What's the retirement now? 20 years, 25 years, whatever the um
But yeah, well, it changed, so it's now 25. It was 20, so I was lucky.
you're lucky. Yeah, yeah. You got you made that cutoff. But for someone to work within law enforcement for 20 years, they have to have a certain level of of passion toward that. And it's amazing to me that it took you working with these timber framers in your little like mini career,
Yep, right.
between your last between your police career and your personal training career, to realize how much of a passion this was for you when you were putting in like 15-hour days, almost half of which was doing personal training and still being an active duty police officer as well. So I mean, it just goes to show us that we all probably should stop and slow down and really reassess, assess and reassess our priorities a little bit more often and the things that we're passionate about, because you found this when you were supposed to, and you landed in this when you were supposed to, obviously. But yeah, I mean, if through the middle and tail end of your career in the police force had realized, like, I must really like this training thing because I'm putting in an extra 4 hours a day at the crack of dawn and at the very end of my day to do this for my fellow officers and for the firefighters in town. There must be something about this that I like just as much, if not more, than what I do from 6 to 4. So I think that just kind of speaks volumes as to how you found your fit and how that passion really just developed over time for you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think that it's always that concern that when you have that hobby that you really love and then you turn it into a profession, that it loses some of that luster.
Sure.
But it certainly hasn't. I can only say that I become more passionate about it and more dedicated with each client that I get and each win that they get. You're kind of living vicariously through the client. Like, we all have our own fitness goals, but they're not as rewarding for me when I get them as when one of my clients achieves something that they're looking for.
Sure. Yeah. No, definitely. I think that's we're all probably in a profession where we directly impact people's lives and livelihoods, and their ability to enjoy the life that they've built, because maybe we didn't get that when we needed it, or we did and we appreciated it, right? We're most of us in that type of profession are probably on one side of that coin or the other. We felt we've learned through our career that maybe we didn't get what we needed back then, or we got everything we needed and we wanted to be able to learn that and share that with other people as well. So I think you hit the nail on the head there. Without getting too far in the weeds here, Derek, talk to us a little bit about your approach now, because as you said, it's sort of been refined over time here a little bit, from the CrossFit style to more of the everyday fitness, like fitness for work style, that when you kind of had that aha moment working with those timber framers, that this is something that you wanted to do maybe more professionally. um how are you really approaching some of this stuff now to tailor the programs the way they need to be tailored for your clients to get those wins that you're so passionate about helping them achieve?
Yeah, I think that initially it comes down to an assessment. And we use the functional movement screen, which I think is a great tool because it puts some objective standards to some movements where, I think every trainer has some level of assessment, but I think that there's some subjectiveness to that. If I just ask you to perform a squat and it's a simple squat too, let's say we're going to do an assessment on somebody who can't squat completely, but we're going to do a box squat, or we're going to have them sit into a chair and stand up. That's really, everybody should know what that movement should look like, but I think that there's some subjectiveness to that interpretation of the movement itself,
Sure.
where the functional movement screen puts objective standards to those movements. So really it starts with an assessment. Not everybody will be able to perform the entirety of that functional movement screen, but at least it gives us as trainers an idea as to whether we're looking at some inefficiency of movement, whether we're looking at some prior injury, if there's mobility issues, if there's weakness. So it gives a place to start from. And I think that where it's different from CrossFit, and certainly we did on-ramp programs for CrossFit, and you walk before you run, but what I think was missing in a lot of CrossFit programming was building a foundation before you handed somebody a barbell and asked them to throw it over their head 30 times as quickly as they could.
Yeah, at this
Yeah,
weight. Oh, by the way, if you're a man, this is the weight you
right.
should be at, and
Yeah,
if you're female, this is the way you should be at. That's probably my,
right.
aside from not so great coaching that you mentioned, that's my other big pet peeve, is this is the prescription. It's like, well, maybe for
Right.
someone who does CrossFit 4 times a week for 3 years, but not for someone it's their first time in the class.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, there's a lot of amazing CrossFit coaches out there. And I think that one of the hardest parts with that is you put a prescription on the board. And for me, I was training police and firefighters. So now to tell them that they can't perform it at what I wrote for a prescribed weight, but I was going to scale that for them as a coach, you better be confident when you're delivering that because you know what you're looking for, you know what metabolic pathway you're looking to challenge in that workout,
Mhm.
and you know that somebody's not going to achieve that if the weight's too high. And I think the intensity can be added by the load that you prescribe to somebody, or the intensity is driven by the individual.
Mm.
So I think that that alone requires a lot of a coach to be able to tell somebody who thinks that they can do a certain weight that no, that's not what we're looking for, we need to back this down. So, I think that yeah, there's a change there just in my programming now. I mean, really the philosophy, and I think it's the philosophy, certainly, it's not my profound thought that we need to build a foundation before we start doing anything else, right? I
Sure.
mean, that should be the way everybody's approaching fitness. They certainly can't ask somebody to squat with a barbell on their back if they can't perform a an efficient air squat.
Right.
um, and so with the programming now, it's nice, for me, again, I get to write my own programs. And um, so I really take that approach. And I always give everybody the analogy of the house, and you can have a great house that has marble floors and it can have granite countertops. But if the foundation's made of sand, then the house isn't going to stand very long. And I
Mm.
think that that's that initial approach to fitness. And I've certainly had people who have come in who can progress relatively quickly. They've already established their own foundation, that old adage that the proximal stability creates distal mobility. Yeah, I mean, it's been around for a long time, but it's true.
Yeah.
And so, why complicate things when the simple approach really works to help somebody to achieve their goals and do it in a way where they're not going to get injured?
Yeah. No, 100%. I always tell people, everyone wants to do the sexy stuff, right?
Yep,
Everyone wants to do the stuff they see on Instagram, the sexy stuff, but you're going to not get nearly as much out of the sexy stuff unless all of this groundwork, all of this individual work of these individual muscles in a less dynamic way, maybe less sexy way, so to speak. Um, if that's not done, then you're not going to get anything out of that big fancy movement that you saw someone who works out 6 days a week do on Instagram. Um, so
yeah,
you gotta start there, or you're not going to get much out of it, and or you're gonna get hurt. That's the big deal.
absolutely. And I think that that it's so important. I don't think there's nobody that wants to be doing Y raises, but I think when we're talking about you know the, the ego lifts are certainly fun. Everybody wants to put up big numbers, but all of the small work, the glute bridges, the Y raises, all the things that, like you said, are not sexy for people to do, they're so necessary because you're going to end up with some nagging injury that's going to put you back 6 months.
Right. Right. Yeah. 100%. No, I love that. I love the approach at EA. And like you said, the vetting process for EA for you and you for EA was just as strict in both directions. And I think that speaks volumes to how you guys operate over there, and the approach you take with everybody. Derek, before we finish up, I've got two more questions for you. But before that, just let people know a little bit about where they can find more information about you slash EA. So if they have questions specifically for you or want to learn more about the gym, they know where to go.
Yeah, absolutely. So the best place to go to would be EA Fitness and Performance. Everything is all spelled out.com. And the website will direct you to the Facebook page. And you can also find the gym at EA Fit Me. So EA Fit and then ME at the end on Instagram. And then there's a Facebook page as well where everybody can go to find out the particulars about the gym and look at our 12-week challenges. And, I'm happy now that we have multiple classes that run. Actually, for all those early folks, we have a 5 a.m. Men's class starting up relatively soon.
Nice.
because I'm the early bird, I will be running that one. So not a
Fantastic.
lot of people, yeah, not a lot of people kicking the door down to teach that one. So
Yeah,
I'll be there.
yeah. That's right. Got the right fit for that 5 a.m. class. That's perfect.
Right.
Awesome. Well, yeah, we'll definitely have that stuff in the show notes, so all of you listening and watching
Mhm.
can check that out. So final two questions here, Derek. First one, and I'm really excited for your answer for this. These aren't trick questions, so don't
Mhm.
don't overthink it. What is your definition of strength?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the great thing about strength, what immediately comes to mind is that it's relative and it's dynamic.
Mm,
And by that I mean, strength is relative in that for each person, strength is going to be a little bit different. Whether we're talking about physical strength or emotional or mental strength, that's going to change. And then, kind of the beauty of strength is that it's dynamic in that it can be lifting heavy weights at one moment, but then the next could be showing a level of vulnerability and being strong enough in who you are to be vulnerable for other people and to
mm,
be vulnerable in front of other people.
yeah.
So, I mean, I guess that it's not a great definition, but at least for me, from me, I think that it's kind of all encompassing. It hits a bunch of different factors.
I think the part I ask these questions for all of our guests because I love how I've never heard the exact same answer twice. We've heard
Hmm.
themes, common
Hmm.
themes and threads, but that part you said about being able to withstand things that both are truly difficult from like a exertion or effort perspective, but at the same time being strong enough to withstand being vulnerable. That's incredible. I think that's an incredible way to look at strength, because you're right, strength comes in a lot more forms than just what we typically think of like chiseled, and able to do the work and
Hmm.
things like that. Like it looks a lot different. That's fantastic. No, I love it. And then lastly, what is your true purpose in life?
Yeah, I think that that's a great question. It reminds me of a quote. I honestly don't know who to attribute it to, but I remember hearing a quote that was essentially that the meaning of life is to find your gift, and then the purpose of life is to give that gift away.
Mm,
And so, I guess that's something that's kind of driven me for a while. I don't know that I've truly found that gift, but I would say that one thing, at least through the course of my police career and moving into training, is that I've always been an instructor in something. So in police work, I was a defensive tactics instructor and taught multiple things and some interview and interrogation things. And then moving on, so I guess for me, it's my purpose is to just bring my 100% anytime I have an interaction with somebody. So if I'm going to be involved with somebody, they're going to have my 100% attention and focus, and I will give them my all anytime I work with them or even speak to them. I mean, I think that you see it in your line of work that a lot of times we're working on something physical, but there's a certain aspect of it where you're kind of a therapist at the same time. Some people just need an ear for somebody to listen to them. And so I would say my purpose is to just give my all, to be invested in what I'm doing at the time, and I owe that to myself as much as I owe it to anyone else. That if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it 100%.
yeah, fantastic. Well, that's awesome. We haven't worked together that long or a ton at this point, but I can already very much see that in you when you're working with clients, when we're chatting, personally or professionally. So thank you very much for living out your true purpose, because a lot of people are better for it. So that's fantastic. Thanks, Derek.
I appreciate that very much, and have a great night. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, and thank you. Yeah, thank you for your time here. Thank you all out there for listening. Make sure you check out EA Fitness and Performance. Derek is not kidding. The community over there is fantastic. It's always a great time being over there when everyone's around and just working on themselves and pushing each other to be better in all aspects. It's great. So check out some info in the show notes about the gym, and make sure you hit up and ask them about how you can get in that 5 a.m. class with Derek, because if anyone's going to make 5 a.m. more fun, it's going to be this guy right here. So check that stuff out. Thank you all for listening. Go make it a great week, and we will see you back here next time on the Strength for Your Purpose podcast. Bye, everybody.